So thank you very much for your time and accepting this interview. This interview is for our JFS project on local economy and happiness for well-being. And I have a few questions. So first of all, I think everybody understands the globalization is not the way we wish to proceed. But actually, the globalization is spreading and reinforcing itself. In your mind, what is the kind of future we can have if we cannot check this globalization? So the just globalization goes on and on.
Well, I think that what will happen is that it may take another few years, it may take another decade before people realize that it is creating a situation where democracy is completely theater, not actual. The people who vote, the people who elect have no say in what's happening, so we can say goodbye to democracy. And because it is structurally, blindly promoting a monoculture, a man-made monoculture of technology and money, imposing standardization on the natural world and on the human world. It is anti-life, and it is so unsustainable. It is so destructive of real individualism, unique, creative, individual self-respect, and of cultural diversity. And it's completely not only disrespecting, but destroying biological diversity. So, we're talking about a sort of a machine of blind speculation linked to giant global businesses that are forced to try to extract the quickest profit, and they're being encouraged to use more and more energy. And that energy is now taking the form of cutting off mountaintops, gas fracking, nuclear power, deep sea excavation, and war. I mean, so it's the appetite for energy is not emanating from a human need for lighting, cooking, heating. It's emanating from an inhuman scale of extraction and imposing consumerism, faster and faster turnover from new products with a shorter lifespan into waste.
Right.
So I think it's only a question of time before globalization will be reversed by our policy makers, because it may end up having to be that the people's movements who are already recognizing that we need this turn, and they're starting to actually do things differently, to build up local economies that demonstrate that we can actually solve so many problems in a systemic shift. So that awareness is growing, and people's awareness is growing. So it really is just a question of time. We cannot continue globalizing for much longer.
Right. So one of the problems of globalization is what you said, in human scale.
Yes.
And when you talk about globalization, you also include the concept of infinite pursuit of growth, economic growth. Is that the same thing with globalization?
Well, I think part of the problem often is that in most countries people are tending to look at things from their own cultural perspective, and from within that framework the fact that globalizing has been linked to GDP measurements is not so clear. And so therefore the way that growth is generated has changed, because we have deregulated how money is produced, we have deregulated how we manage the flow of money, we have deregulated businesses across the board. So this growth that is so destructive is absolutely centrally linked to globalization. And I think when we understand that, it becomes clearer what we need to do. And also I think the cultural as well as the ecological, destruction on one hand and benefits of localization on the other become more obvious.
Right. So as you said, there are many localization movement here and there, and they're very encouraging. And So the localization is something similar to degrowth movement, or they're totally different things, but doing happening at the same time?
I think that the degrowth movement is actually very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually started by a friend of mine, Serge Latouche,
Yeah.
who I've known for 25, 30 years, and his view was also very much influenced by living in Africa. And I think when you have the experience of both the less industrialized and the more industrialized parts of the world, this global system becomes more obvious,
Yes.
and the problems with this type of growth and this type of development become more obvious. So I think our view is very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
However, Serge, as an economist, has not been so involved with the fundamentals, I would say, of the economy, which to me have to do with the actual production, farming particularly, forestry, fishery. And I think when we get closer to that real economy, which is producing what we absolutely need, then the emphasis on localizing becomes clearer. And I feel also that emphasizing the strengthening of local economies, local communities worldwide, may be a vision that maybe would grab more people. But I don't know. I may be wrong. It may be that degrowth appeals to more people, but at the center of this movement that he started and what I've tried to start, very, very similar perspective.
Right. In my image, if you are pursuing localization, as a result or as a byproduct, you may reach degrowth. But is there anything localization which is also focusing on growth?
Yes, I think one of the things that I have experienced is that within a scale where human beings have better sense of the whole cycle, from production to consumption to waste, and that means literally from the earth back to the earth, that whole cycle, where people can perceive that cycle, you can have a certain degree of growth in the sense of you can have more businesses, you could have more jobs, and you could have some people earning more money than other people. But if it needs to happen at a scale where social and ecological feedback loops create an intelligent and just reaction. So in that way, I do feel that within the localization model, there can be, as it were, a certain degree of growth. But very, very clearly limited for ecological and social reasons.
Right. As you said, if you're talking about real economy, which is producing, for example, food and the timber and others, there should be happening on the ground.
Yes.
So you cannot ignore the capacity of the earth. So, I mean, so you said the growth is possible, but with limitation.
Yeah, that growth is possible. And of course, I've literally had arguments with economists at the World Bank who were trying to tell me that my questioning GDP and this type of growth meant that I was questioning people growing food, and that we want trees that we planted to grow tall and healthy. We want a lot of growth.
Yes.
And he, in his mind, was literally confusing economic growth with that. And I was trying to say, no, the sort of economic growth you're encouraging is literally killing the growth of ecosystems, the growth of plants and vegetables and trees and fish and,
So you have been talking about and doing about the economy of happiness.
Yes.
So there are localized vision, I think. And maybe you can talk about what is the structure of the economy of happiness.
Yeah, the structure of the economics of happiness is essentially a structure where the connections between people, and that again has to do with the production and the consumption, and also the relationship between the voter and the people who are voted in, the relationship between the performer and the audience, the distances are of a scale and short enough that people feel connected and are able to participate. That means smaller scale units than what we have in the global economy.
Yes.
And at every level, when I look at the world today, you know, even the Olympic Games, when they started, it was associated with peace, and there was a certain degree of competition, but it was healthy.
Yeah.
Now it's become linked to this humongous commercializing institutions, and what it's doing is pushing people into such intense competition that it virtually leads to illness. You know, you have to, if you're going to be playing baseball or something, you've got to do nothing but that, you know, 24 hours virtually a day. You can often destroy your body in a short time, and in almost every field, in music, in politics, in acting, you have a few stars who earn billions, and then you have a lot of people who are not able to do anything. So this disenfranchising of the majority is part of the global path where the distances grow and where specialization is structurally linked to the system. In the localized model, we're talking about human beings being able to develop more skills than just one, are able to develop a more fully human potential, also meaning both practical and intellectual contributions to society, and where they can have the satisfaction of seeing the impact of what they do. So absolutely central to this is the combination of more, if you like, holistic, interdisciplinary knowledge, and that means from schooling, science at every level, and smaller scale economic units and economic impact. That is going to come about best if we have more international collaboration. So localizing is not about isolationism. It's very important that people understand that it's the opposite we need today. More communication, real communication, particularly between the global north and global south. And I do want to say that our organization, my little organization, is almost unique in the whole world in that we are, to my knowledge, the only ones that are working in both north and south. And also with both the critique of the dominant system and with the systemic solution. We're not just focusing on only yes and solutions or only critiquing the dominant system, but I feel we have a systemic critique and a systemic solution. So I believe that disseminating this more holistic understanding widely, globally, is the type of activism that we need today. And I'm very grateful that you're doing that. And I think many people are at a loss because they feel that they can't go out and demonstrate in the streets. And then they feel powerless. But there is this hugely important area where we can be activists in disseminating a vision, disseminating ideas and information. And I think once that catches on, that will create a very powerful movement for meaningful change that can proceed in a way that is completely without violence. We don't need revolution, and we absolutely don't need violence, but we do need a better understanding. We do need consciousness raising.
Right.